Hello, everyone, and happy October. I am Dr. Portia Jackson, Business Development Manager with the City of Houston's Office of Business Opportunity. We are so glad that you are joining us here today on Facebook Live. And today we are talking about cybersecurity. October is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and we wanted to do something special for our small businesses to let you know what the precautions you need to take as far as cybersecurity. And we have an expert today, Mr. Ken Underhill, and I'm going to introduce him right now. So I'm going to bring up my screen to share with you. Ken Underhill, he is a multi-award winning and international recognized business consultant, so cybersecurity leader, entrepreneur, and the executive producer and host of Cyber Live television show, which starts next month. He is the recipient of the 2019 SC Media Reboot Leadership Award for Outstanding Educator for educating over 1 million students around the world. Just this year alone, and we know this has been a quite interesting year. This year alone, he has been nominated for the Houston Business Journal's 40 Under 40 Award and has been nominated for the Cyber Champion Award for his work to improve diversity and women's rights in the cybersecurity industry. He also sits on an advisory board for critical infrastructure, cybersecurity startup, and is the SVP of marketing. He has been featured in over 100 publications, including Forbes, Reader's Digest, Medium, Tech Republic, Fox, NBC, Dark Reading, and Voyage Houston magazine. And we are so glad to have him here today to share the importance of cybersecurity for small businesses and also to provide you all with some tips. So we thank you all for tuning in. And Ken, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Dr. Jackson. Always appreciate it. Always happy to help out where I can.
Awesome. So I'm going to turn it over to you. So just go ahead and take it away.
Sounds good. Give me a sec, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen real quick just so we can look at some of the beautiful PowerPoint slides I put together. We always enjoy slides. And I think we're still having some people join us, so we'll give them a sec or so here. Cool. So just making sure everyone, I know there's a delay with this being a Facebook Live, just making sure everyone can actually hear us on the Facebook Live. So just if in the comments, if you don't mind just letting us know you can hear us. Otherwise, all of this is for no reason if you can't actually hear us. So we're going to talk today about some very fundamental cybersecurity things that you as a business owner can be doing, and then some things you should be mindful of. So we're going to start off by making you a little paranoid at first, and then we'll get into some of the things you can actually do to help mitigate all of these issues. You'll notice a lot of letters after my name there. I'm a certified ethical hacker and some other things, and we'll talk about those a little later on in the presentation. Let's start off with some stats. So the average global cost of a data breach is around $4 million. Now they take that from small businesses all the way up to your larger enterprises like Google's, the Amazons of the world. So that number doesn't necessarily mean that every company globally is getting hit with 4 million, but it's just a rough estimate. The US, we like to go above and beyond. So we're a little more than double that, right? We're a little over 8 million. And if we look at healthcare in particular, it's a little over 7 million. And healthcare is actually, as we've seen in the media with ransomware and things like that, healthcare is actually a very lucrative target for criminal hackers. And when I say criminal hackers, I'm using a more generalized approach to the bad guys and the bad gals out there. When we look at small businesses, it's still in many cases a multi-million-dollar issue. So you see there less than 500 employees, which is most of the people probably on this call. It's still a couple $1 million. Now that doesn't mean that everyone's, again, getting hit with a couple $1 million in a data breach, right? Many of them are a few $100,000, but you really have to ask yourself, can my business still function, still move on, especially during a pandemic, if I've got to pay $250,000 because of this data breach, right? The answer for most business owners, especially here in Houston, is no. You're going to have to go out of business. So this is why this is such an important thing to keep in mind. And when we say cybersecurity, when you hear that terminology, it's really an entire industry. So there's not one specific thing. It's not just hacking. It's not just policies. It's not just compliance. It's all these facets of it that wrap up into cybersecurity. And we're not going to deep dive on that today, but just so you understand sort of a high level view. Again, just make sure in the comments, just post in the comments of this live if you can hear us okay. Just want to make sure everyone can hear us. So how long does it actually take for us to figure all this out? So I'm sitting there as a business owner and I'm going along with my day. What's the average time for me to actually realize that something's happened, that something's amiss, or that my data's been stolen in some capacity? In many cases, and the average is 207 days. However, in many cases, you may not know for years until some researcher comes across your information out there in the dark web or anywhere else, and then says, hey, guess what? You were breached 2 years ago. And so that's why, as kind of the general public, we might see a breach happen and say, well, why didn't they know about this? They're a Fortune 500 company. But in reality, the criminals don't want you to know they're in there for obvious reasons. They want to steal your stuff. And so there's a period of time before we actually can detect something, or that we do detect something. And then there's a period of time where we have to resolve that particular issue. So there's an incident response process is kind of the terminology for that recovery time period. So all that being said, who am I? And Dr. PJ introduced me a little bit. I've got over 2 million students globally that I've educated in cybersecurity topics. As she mentioned, I've won multiple awards. I have a TV show launching around cybersecurity next month. Two parts of that TV show without promoting it too much. One is going to be teaching the general public about cybersecurity. So if you're interested in this stuff as we do this presentation today, it's a good place to tune in. And then you'll also get to see the real people of the industry that as I interview them about different topics that are important for not just business owners, but also you as an individual and your family. Before we dive into the sort of the meat and potatoes of the presentation, let's talk about how much you're actually worth. Now, of course, I think you're priceless, right? You think you're priceless, your family, hopefully they agree too. But in reality, you're not worth that much on what's called the dark web. And the dark web isn't just a criminal element, right? There's other things on the dark web. For example, journalists in certain countries that are very oppressive. They're on the dark web because that's the only way they can get information out. So it's not always bad people on the dark web. However, there is a criminal element there. And the criminal element is the one that we're going to be kind of talking about today as far as when we look at these pricing models and when we talk about criminal hackers. So when I say criminal hackers, again, I'm talking about those individuals with malicious intent against us, our companies, or our families, right? So you see here some pricing. This is average pricing on the dark web. A few things about the dark web. Number one, you can get a rough average, but keep in mind, number one, don't go there. Let's say that. Number one, don't go to the dark web. There's no reason for you to go playing around in there. If you don't know what you're doing, it's not a good place to be. Number two, very important that you understand the information that we hold dear, the credit cards, dates of birth, those sorts of things that here in the real world or the surface web, we think that it's so valuable, right? Because to us, it is valuable. But you have to understand in different areas of the world, a dollar US. So I'll give you an example. Bangladesh has an average salary of $10 US, a monthly salary, right? Think about that. How many times do you spend $10 at Starbucks and you don't even think about it? So when we look at this pricing and we say, oh, it's only $15, it's only $35 to get my credit card information, that's not worth a lot to us, right? That's not a big price to us. But to someone in another country, that might be an annual salary. That might be a monthly salary. That might be the difference between them sending their children to school or not, right? That might make a difference in their family. And so when we talk about cyber crime at a very high level, you have to understand it's not cut and dry, right? It's not a 0 and a 1, to talk binary for a second. It's not, oh, they should do this or they shouldn't do this. And we're not going to dive into what people should be doing because that's their life. But you have to understand there's an element behind it, much like if you grew up poor here in the US. I grew up very, very poor. And I had a different mindset when I was very poor and very broke, right? I was trying to survive. You have a different mindset than you do as someone like us with a business, with, generally speaking, financial resources or opportunity that we have in this country. So when you see these prices on the dark web that I'll show you here in the next few slides, understand that to us, it may not seem like a lot of money, but to someone else, that is a lot of money. And that's why cybercrime continues. That's why it's lucrative. And that's why people are going to continue to do it pretty much until the dawn of time. So you see credit card information here. Doesn't go for a whole lot. If you need a new driver's license, just go to the DMV, right? Don't go on here and buy it, but you can buy it if you were a criminal. You can buy it for less than $1,000 usually. The other thing to keep in mind about the dark web is there's a lot of scammers on there because it's criminals, right? You've got criminals on there. Can you really trust a criminal? Well, no, right? Of course not. And so that they're generally speaking going to scam each other. So there's review processes on some of these underground sites where kind of like an Amazon review, like you might give 5 stars or something as a seller. So just keep that in mind. There's an entire commerce, right? An entire marketplace, an entire world that lives outside of the world you live in. And so when we do these different steps that we'll talk about today, it doesn't really matter, right? And I hate to say that, but it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, if a company like Equifax isn't doing what they need to do, then your data is going to be stolen and more than likely sold at some point on the dark web. So we're going to do some things today. We'll talk about some things to kind of mitigate things and things to be mindful of, but understand if you haven't been a victim of a breach yet, which is pretty rare, but if you haven't yet, understand that at some point you will. And you just really need to understand in your mind, like, what would I do at that point, right? Especially when you're talking about your business. So just some more pricing here. You can get PayPal accounts. You can buy anything, right? It's kind of like a Walmart or Target or something, or Amazon. You can go buy anything you want virtually on the dark web if you know where to look. Again, there's a lot of scammers out there, but it's pretty easy to buy things. Now, we won't talk about legalities. I'll just tell you, don't go to the dark web, and definitely if you do, don't go buying stuff because you may put yourself, at least here in the US, in a lot of situations you don't want to be in. Malware. So we hear about ransomware, especially targeting healthcare organizations recently, as well as big companies, right? Fortune 500 companies, big companies globally are getting hit with ransomware attacks. This shows you some pricing of how cheap it is, right? In fact, this isn't even showing you what's called the ransomware as a service options out there that you can subscribe for $50, $100 a month, and you can have malware as a service, right? And so as a criminal, I don't have to learn how to write my own stuff. I can be a script kiddie and write and just use somebody else's stuff and click a few buttons and poof, I've got malware and it's bringing me in money each month. And sometimes I'll have to give a percentage to who owns the malware, kind of a licensing fee, but it's very, very cheap, very low cost to do. And that's why it's just so prevalent, right? And it's not just people overseas doing it. There's a lot of criminals here in the US as well targeting. And the other thing to keep in mind about the US, why you see that the average cost of a data breach is around 8 million, because US is very lucrative, right? We're capitalism. We have a good economy for the most part. Even during a pandemic, right? People still have money. There's still people buying things. People are still shopping on Amazon. And so you have to understand that this country has a lot of money that a lot of people would love to take. And one way they do that is through ransomware attacks. The other thing I'll mention is there's some debate out there. Should I pay a ransom? Should I not pay a ransom? Going back to what we talked about earlier of criminals scamming criminals, do you honestly think a criminal is going to release your information because you paid money to them? And money usually being in the form of Bitcoin. The answer is more than likely not, right? You're going to pay you the money. They're not going to release your data and you're out of luck. And we'll talk about something you can do kind of in advance so that way if you are a victim of a ransomware attack, you have a better shot of actually getting your data back. And then here's just some more information. If you guys remember the Mira botnet, which targeted IoT devices, so Internet of Things, your phone, your security cameras, a few years ago, actually, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, you see there $6. You can buy the source code, which is the programming code for that, and create your own Mira botnet for just $6 US. Very, very cheap to do. We've talked a little bit about some of the dark web pricing, some of the average pricing out there. What do hackers actually look like? Well, I'm one, right? But I'm a legal one. And so I look like this. And this is how Hollywood typically portrays hackers, right? They're in a dark room. There's a lot of computer monitors. There's all these zeros and ones flying across the screen. They're hacking the Pentagon in 5 seconds. You know, they've got a hoodie on, they've got gloves on, they probably have a mask on or something, and all these cliches, right? Let's look at reality right here, right? These are actual real professional hackers. I know these are some of the good people, right? The good guys and gals out there. Top left, Chris Roberts, very well-known hacker. Top right, Chris Kubeka. And all of these individuals do a lot of contract work for many three-letter agencies, many other government agencies, many Fortune 100, 500,000 companies. A lot of the big names out there that you've probably heard of, these people have worked with them to help them find issues in their systems. Bottom left, we have Mary Galloway. In fact, I'm up for an award on Friday, and it's through her nonprofit organization, the Women's Society of Cyber Jitsu. And then at the bottom right, we have Zaid. He's another well-known hacker. In fact, he teaches about 500,000 people a year, roughly, to do computer hacking ethically, right? So ethical hacking, or what we call in the industry penetration testing, or pen testing for short. So the reality is hackers look like all of us, right? It's a neighbor kid. It could be your husband, your wife, it could be your grandmother. It could be the kid at the grocery store. It could be just a random stranger. They don't normally wear hoodies. They don't normally wear gloves, all this secretive stuff. They're usually sitting next to you at Starbucks hacking something, and they're probably hacking you, and you don't even realize it. So let's talk about some common mistakes that we see business owners in general, not just small business owners, but also business owners in general. So enterprise level even are making these mistakes. And these are some fundamental sort of mistakes that they're making. By far, one of the biggest mistakes ever is using weaker passwords or just keeping the default password. So what do I actually mean by that? Default passwords are things like, let's say I get my modem from the cable company, and they set it up with a username and password. I never change that. And so if I never change that, if they set it up with just default credentials, which a lot of times is like admin, then what can happen is an attacker that knows about that can simply attack my home router, right? And I have no idea that they're doing it generally, unless I'm technical, and they do whatever they want on my home network. They can monitor my cameras. They can see what my kids are doing. They can find out when I'm home, when I'm not home, all these things that I don't want them to do. If it's in my business, they can figure out when I'm not there physically in my business, so they can break in and steal things. Maybe they just want to steal my data. And so as I enter in my business bank account information to check my balance, they steal those login credentials. They log in and wipe out my entire account. What would you do? And post this in the comments. What would you do if someone logged in today and stole all of the money in your business bank account? Like what steps would you take? So just kind of think through that, and feel free to post your answers in the comments there. Think about what you would actually do in that situation, because that happens, and it happens unfortunately quite a lot. And we'll talk about some of the things, like I said, that we can do to kind of mitigate or help prevent against that. By the way, if your password is on this list, post in the comments and let me know what that password is. And then make sure you change it. So what I did right there, besides saying, hey, you shouldn't use these passwords, I also did what's called social engineering. We'll talk about that a little later on as well. But I basically said, hey, in the comments, post this, because so far, right, you've said, hey, this guy's just doing a presentation. He's a good hacker, right? He tells us he's an ethical hacker, and there's no worries there. But if you honestly posted your password, and I know people will be silly and they'll throw the, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is my password. But I know most people are kidding about this being the real password, or are they, right? But that's a technique of social engineering. It's very easy to get people to give you information online. So we'll talk also about what we need to be mindful of when we're doing things online, not just social media, not just around passwords, but kind of overall. Outdated software. So we're not updating our software. This was a huge issue, and still is a huge issue in the healthcare industry when I worked as a pen tester there. Very big issue. Partly it's a cost issue. Now let me explain. So there's a lot of legacy systems in use out there, specifically around pharmacy and nursing, that the companies are no longer in business or they've been purchased so many times that the current owner will not support that outdated software. And so these companies, these healthcare organizations have all this outdated software and they can't update it ever, right? So it's just sitting there, but it's attached to the network in some capacity, right? So the computer network. And if you don't know what a network is, it's just the communication, right? So it's a way for us to communicate, kind of like we're using the Facebook Live right now, right? I'm communicating with you, you're listening to me, we're sending information back and forth. That's all a computer network is. And, you know, we have big ones, little ones, et cetera, but that's all it's doing. It's communicating, allowing us to communicate information. So these outdated systems are connected to these networks. In one particular instance, I can recall they had an outdated, I won't say exactly what system because I might give away the company, but they had an outdated system that was being used for healthcare critical things in healthcare. And that actually prevented them from doing a cloud migration, right? So into the cloud, this magical cloud that we won't dive into on this session. But this prevented them from going to that because they had to use outdated Windows operating systems to run this old software. So they were running Windows 95 actually for this antiquated software, which, I mean, that's just, don't do that. If you have Windows 95, figure out a different way. It's very outdated, obviously. And so they were using this, and so they couldn't do cloud migration. And so they had to weigh the cost, right? Do we update this software to a new type of software because we can't update this one? Do we go to a new type of software for solving this business problem that's very expensive just so we can move everything else to the cloud? And so that was a debate. It took them a while to make that decision, but fortunately, they eventually made the right decision, got a new updated system that came with updates that would continue to be updated even if the company was sold. And then they were also able to update all their other systems, and in particular, the Windows operating systems, to make sure that they were compliant to be able to move to the cloud, at least for some of their data. Why am I saying all that? You may be a small business. Why do I care about that? I'm not using the cloud. Well, you are, but you're not using cloud in that capacity. The reason you should care is because your laptop, right? Your iPhone, your Android devices, these are things you need to keep the software updated on. The vast majority of vulnerabilities out there that are exploited are against outdated software. For example, you can hack an Android phone in a matter of minutes, right? I can hack your phone in a matter of minutes, probably less than 10 minutes. It probably won't take me that long. But the attacks I would use are for several versions back of the operating system. So that's why it's important for you to continuously update your operating system on your mobile devices to keep current, keep the patches current, keep the information in there current, keep the code current. Is it 100%? No, nothing in security is ever going to be 100%. But many of the attacks out there that are being exploited in what we call the wild or the real world, the attacks being exploited in the wild are against outdated software. So you should always update your software. That goes for your apps as well on your mobile devices and on your computers, right? On your desktop or your laptop. That includes not just Windows, that includes Mac, Linux, right? Keep it updated. Even if you're using like the Tails operating system, you still need to update to the latest version, right? And have the latest version available. So there's a lot of different things you need to keep updated. So I typically recommend people just set auto updates. Just keep it automatically updated. With Android devices, you have to be careful. A lot of them don't automatically update or allow you to. So you just set a day. Set one day a week that you call your security day, right? One day a week, hey, it's Sunday, it's security day, or Saturday, it's security day, or Wednesday, it's security day. Take an hour, go through all your stuff, make sure you look at the last time you changed your password, make sure your software is up to date, your browsers are up to date, your Google Chrome and stuff are up to date, right? Your Firefox, whatever browsers you use, Safari, make sure all that stuff's up to date, but set it one day a week so you don't forget. Because the worst thing you want to do is get excited about this webinar we just did, and then next week you're back to the same habits, right? That's not the goal. The goal is for you to bake in security in everything you do. Clicking links, I never click in link. If you send me a text message with a link, I will never click it, ever. I will never click the link, so forget about it. What I do instead is I will take that link, throw it in an email to myself, and open it in what I call a sandbox or a virtual machine. That way I can see what's that link doing? What is the site that you're sending me to? What's that doing? And I'm going to leave it alone in that virtual machine because I want to see if it's going to, because there's some malware out there that will wait because it's in a virtual machine. And so it'll wait like 72 hours before it actually launches, right? So I'm going to leave that virtual machine up on another isolated system and just keep an eye on it, see what happens, see if there's malware on that. So never click a link that somebody texts you. I'm just going to say that again. Never click a link that somebody texts you. Why, right? Besides the fact that there's a risk of malware and stuff like that. The other reason is you can't really see where that link goes, right? You don't have an ability to hover over that link on a mobile device and see where does this really go to? Is it really google.com or is it sending me to malware.com, right? You can't really tell on a mobile device. So never click a link in your mobile device, right? So never click it via text message or anything like that. If you do, if it's a malicious link, if I was a criminal hacker, I could send you a link, you click it, then I take over your device and you have no idea. So every time you take a selfie or you take some compromising photos, I'm stealing that. Every time you take a photo of your kids, I'm stealing that. Every time you log into your bank, I'm stealing that information. Every time you log in your email, I'm stealing that. Every time you go on Facebook or something, I'm stealing all that information. All because you clicked a link in a text, right? Now, if you're using your mobile device primarily, if you don't use your laptop a lot, then I would copy the link, right? And then paste it into a website called virustotal.com. So virustotal.com. It's not 100% like anything, but it's a community project where it will scan against some of the most common anti-malware solutions and tell you if any of them are flagging that link as malicious. Again, not 100%. There's ways to bypass that, but it's sort of a good measure for most people. Do the same thing with any link you ever get. Throw it in VirusTotal, see what happens. It may not be malware. It might be it might flag as malware or malicious, and there may not be malware on the site, but do you really want to take that risk? I don't. I don't take that risk with my business, and you probably shouldn't either. Physical security. A lot of people think all this technology, all this stuff, and then you walk in their place of business and they've got their laptop sitting there just waiting for someone to get into it and steal their stuff. So physical security, yes, door locks, that sort of stuff. But really what I'm talking about is when I walk into your place of business, can I get your phone or your laptop or your tablet? And am I able to get access to that without you knowing, right? Or am I able to distract you to where I can get that access? Or do you have a scanned key card for access to critical parts of your building or your business? If so, can I get close enough to you to clone that with a tool and then take that and go get myself in those areas? So when we talk about physical security, that's what we're talking about there. Your website. This is a huge one for small business owners. I see all sorts of issues, specifically also around privacy, and we'll talk about that in a second. But number one, not using two-factor authentication for your domain host. So for example, if you've got like GoDaddy, and all you're doing to log into it is your email or your username and a password, I want you to go in and enable what's called two-factor authentication. What that means is it's going to send you a text message with a little code, usually 6 or 7 digits, or you can use an app called an authenticator app like Google Authenticator, free to download, and that generates a random code, usually 6 digits. It'll generate that random code, and then you've got a period of time to type it in before that code expires. What that does is if I'm a criminal hacker over in India, for example, and I try to get into your website account, when I log in, it's going to ask me for that code. Well, unless I've already compromised your phone, I'm not getting that code. So that helps protect your account against those types of individuals. Now, again, nothing's 100%, right? Unfortunately. So we have to keep in mind that we still need to monitor, we still need to change our password every so often, et cetera, et cetera. But this is a good, easy way that you can do like right now, literally, after you get off this presentation, and enable that on your website. Privacy policies. I see so many small business owners that have no privacy policy on their website. Let me start by saying this is not legal advice, but you need to talk to an attorney, specifically a cybersecurity attorney, or someone that's in that space around privacy law. Why? Because if you're selling like e-commerce and you sell to someone in the European Union, guess what? You're under GDPR. And things here in the US, like New York Shield, as well as CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act, and a lot of other legislation that's in the works, requires you to tell people what you're doing with their data, right? So that's where the privacy policy comes in. Cookie policy, GDPR. guess what? If anyone in the EU logs into your site, you better have a cookie policy. If you go to my website, knltech.com, you'll see a little pop-up that says, do you accept the cookie policy, right? That's what you need to have there. So a lot of business owners don't have that. Guess what? You're in violation more than likely of things like GDPR. And they don't care that you say, well, I'm a small business, blah, blah, blah. They don't care. They're going to fine you, right? Or in most cases, they'll fine you. Something else that's going around right now, there's a lot of lawsuits going around in California, New York, a lot of small, shady law firms doing this. They're hitting small business owners with lawsuits around the American Disabilities Act. Now, again, not legal advice here. Most of us on here as small business owners don't have to comply with ADA because we don't meet that criteria. However, right, there's always a catch. However, just because that's the case doesn't mean we're not going to get sued on it. So what's happening is these shady law firms are going around suing small business owners saying they're in violation of ADA. Now you have a couple options there, right? They give you an option to settle, or you can try to fight them in court. Let's say you fight them in court and you win, but it costs you 20, 30 grand in little litigation fees. And then another one turns around and sues you again. And then another one sues you, or let's say worse, you settle with the first one. Then all these other ones jump on board. So that's what we're seeing right now in the wild. We're seeing a lot of these shady law firms around the country, not just California and New York, but that's where it's kind of started, suing small business owners around ADA compliance. So what can you do with your website? Well, easy. There's a free tool called Wave. So I'm going to save you like 3 grand right now, because if you go to a general cybersecurity company, they'll charge you $3,000 or so to do a scan for you. You know, it's a magical scan, right? Really what they're doing is using a free tool like Wave, and they're scanning your website. They're getting that report. They send you that report, and they don't tell you anything about how to fix it. Then they say, oh, well, if you pay us an extra 20 grand, then we'll go ahead and fix all these issues or tell you how to fix them. Save yourself a few $1,000s, do a Wave scan, and then give that information to your web developer and say, hey, I need to make sure these things are fixed so I'm ADA compliant with my site, or at least mostly ADA compliant with my site. If you're using a site builder through like a GoDaddy or something, normally or typically you will meet most of the criteria, but you still would want to run a scan just to make sure, right? Just to make sure you're actually meeting that criteria. The other issue is people put security on a back burner. It's like, well, I don't really need to. I mean, it's security. Nobody's going to hack me. I'm a small business. It's not going to happen, whatever, right? The reality is you need to look at cybersecurity and all these fundamental things we're going to talk about as a profit driver, right? So not just revenue, but a profit driver. What do I mean by that? So it could be a revenue driver. It could be that, hey, we're meeting all this criteria and we're doing all these fundamental security things. So that's why you should do business with us over someone else. It could also be a profit generator because you're saving money by helping mitigate or prevent breaches, right? Or at least reducing your chances of a breach. And so you're saving money long-term by doing that. So it's a profit generator. Now, let's think about this in context, and I'll just share an example. If I go to your website, and number one, I will never go to a website that's just HTTP, not using a security certificate, basically. I will never go to your website outside of a virtual machine, a sandbox, as I mentioned earlier. And when I go there, if I see HTTP, I automatically assume you're not a legitimate business. I automatically assume that. And even if you are, I won't do business with you. And that's me personally, but that's reality. So back when I lived in a very low economic neighborhood, I mean, dealt with drive-by shootings, all that stuff, right? When you live in certain neighborhoods. And there was this individual that lived there, this young woman lived there. And something she mentioned to her boyfriend one time when she was talking about having a job and stuff like that was, it's regular, bro. That was her exact terminology. And so I always think of that when I think about people not using a security certificate on the website. So they're not having it say HTTPS. That's regular, right? That's regular business 101 these days. You need to have a security certificate. If you don't, you're losing business. I can guarantee you you're losing business. So make sure you do that. So let's talk real quick about the #1 attack method. But before we do, just post in the comments. Let me know if you're learning something new today. So just post real quick in the comments. Just say, yes, I am. Yes, I'm learning something new. You could type it all out, or you could just put yes. If all of this is everything you know already, then just type no, I'm not learning something new. But if you're learning something new, just type real quick in the comments, yes, I'm learning something new. So I see we got a few yeses there real quick. So let's talk about the #1 attack method. Now, if you look at different studies out there, you'll see them talking about hacking and stuff. This is a part of hacking. Number one attack method is phishing, and they don't really use a phishing pool, but phishing attacks. Many stats out there peg it as over 70%. I've seen some studies pegging it over 90%. I can tell you right now that right now in the wild, the vast majority of attacks are phishing related. So those are the emails or different forms of phishing, right? It could be email attacks, which is the primary method. It could also be text message or smishing attacks, as we call them, via SMS messaging, which is a text messaging. It could be vishing attacks or voice phishing attacks, which is over the phone, right? So someone calls up your company, they pretend to be someone, or let's say you work for someone else, right? And they call you up and they say they're with tech support. They want you're a new employee. They just need you to confirm your password to make sure it's strong enough. And then now the bad people have your password. So that's the importance of phishing attacks, why we need to be mindful of those. Let's talk about Willy Wonka. Is everyone familiar with Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? Whether or not you've seen the movie, but are you just familiar with it? And go ahead and type that in the chat real quick and just say, yes, I am, or Willy Wonka rules, or whatever you want to say. But let's talk about Bad Charlie for a second. And I'm not saying Charlie was bad, but let's just talk in the aspect of social engineering. You've got this kid, low economic, right? Depending on where he lives at, could be looking to get money, could be looking to get it in a shady way, right? Stumbles across this magical golden ticket in a candy bar. And this golden ticket is his entry into this company, right? And so if we think back to when we talked about default credentials of admin, or admin 1234, or whatever, that golden ticket is that default credential, right? It allows us to get into the company pretty easily. Then what he did is he did what's called social engineering, right? Which we talked about before. Charlie went in there and he won over Willy Wonka, right? I'm just an innocent kid. I'm just here. I love candy, blah, blah, blah. But if you notice, he was able to get rid of all his competition, right? And then he was able to get in there and eventually get the factory, right? He was able to, I haven't watched the movie in years. I'm pretty sure if I recall, that's what happened. But he was able to get all that stuff. All because he was able to show Willy Wonka that he's just a good guy, right? And maybe he is, or maybe he's not. Who knows? For me, I think the best social engineer in history is Garfield. Garfield got everything he wanted, if you're familiar with the comics. Anything he wanted. He controlled the human, he controlled the dog, he would blame the dog for things. He would get anything he wanted, travel where he wanted to, sleep all day long, dream about sleeping. If you looked at the comments, you know what I'm talking about. Garfield, social engineer at its best, right, at its finest, because it's all about human manipulation, the psychology aspect of it. Earlier, I mentioned when we were looking at the common passwords, I said, hey, are you using any of these? Type yes in the chat. How many people typed yes, right? That's all parts of social engineering. So that's why I live a life where I'm naturally skeptical. I'm not believing you. I'm going to do research on anything you tell me and fully vet you. And you need to do the same thing, honestly, with your business. You need to vet people. So now we've kind of talked about some stats. We've talked about all these things, and we've talked about some common things that business owners are doing, some common mistakes. What should we actually do? And we'll kind of run through these pretty quickly. Number one, do a concept called defense in depth. And you may not be able to see, let me move my little box here on my end. Defense in depth. What is this? Let's talk about your house for a second. Let's pretend you have a big screen TV, or if you got an Xbox, or you got jewelry, or just something you find valuable, right? It could be your kids. Maybe you don't want someone stealing your kids. How do you protect that? Well, we probably maybe have a fence around our house, right? Kind of a bigger fence or something. Maybe we live in a gated community. Maybe we have a security system, alarm system, security cameras. We possibly have some dogs, right? Some big dogs, right? Rottweilers, German Shepherds. We're in Texas, so many people probably have a gun, right? Or a couple guns, or many guns. There's probably some other weapons in the house. You may take some self-defense classes to learn how to fight, right? Some Krav Maga or tactical ninjutsu like I practice. And so all these things are just ways to prevent the bad people, or to make it more difficult for them to steal our stuff. We take that same concept in security. We just put different things in place to make it more difficult. We talked about the two-factor authentication with your website earlier. All we're doing is making it more challenging for someone to get into your website and control it, so they go to somebody else. And that's sad to say, we never want anyone to be a victim, but reality is someone has to be the victim, and we don't want it to be us or our business. So send them elsewhere, put layers of security in place. That's all defense in depth is. Using an antivirus, anti-malware solution, that's endpoint security is what we call that. That's on your laptops, your desktops. If you have an Android device, download an antivirus on there. Usually iOS devices, you don't need to worry about that because the way those work is they launch apps in a sandbox, right? So kind of a mini virtual machine, like I was talking about before. That's how the apps are launched in that. So that's the difference in the architecture of your iPhone versus your Android device. That being said, not 100%, right? Common theme, right? Not 100%. So antivirus, anti-malware solutions, when I'm writing custom code for malware for research, I can tell you right now, the first thing I do is I test it against all the common vendors out there. So Malwarebytes, your Norton, your Trend Micros of the world, your Bitdefender, all these different companies, I just test my code against them through a hacking app, and it says, oh, it's flagging on this one. I adjust my code, or I obfuscate it somehow, I encrypt it, or I do like Unicode or something to change it. And eventually I get it to where it doesn't flag either on most of them, or it doesn't flag at all. And that's what most real attackers will be doing. But the reason why you want antivirus or anti-malware is because you want to prevent against a lot of the script kiddies out there. And again, script kiddies are just people that have no idea what they're doing. They're just using other people's stuff to run. And a lot of times they're being sold the stuff that usually works against older attacks. If you've got good antivirus, anti-malware solution on there, then you're mitigating stuff quite a bit. We already talked about two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, just making sure that it's just not a username and password to get into something. You need some other step in place there. Don't share your username and password. Don't share your laptop with somebody else. Don't share your phone with somebody else. There was a young woman that works in cybersecurity that was at a coffee shop, and she was asking a stranger, hey, can you watch my laptop? And fortunately, the stranger was a jerk and wouldn't do it, right? So she had to take her stuff to the restroom. But when she told me about this, I was like, what are you doing, right? Like, no, like that could have been anyone, right? Honestly, you leave your desktop, you leave your laptop or your phone with somebody, or even just having them watch your stuff. Why do you trust a stranger? Honestly, stop trusting strangers so much. Don't share your stuff. Don't share your login stuff with anyone. Don't share, right? Don't share. I know we're taught as children to share. Don't share. Don't share as a business owner. What else can we do? Lots of different things, right? And this is not an all-inclusive list, but use a VPN when you're using any type of public Wi-Fi. VPN is just an encrypted tunnel. Think of it as criminals are the water, and we as a data are inside a tunnel going through the water, right? So we're protected from the criminals through this magical tunnel, right? That's what a VPN is. Keeping our software up to date, making sure we have backups. So back up your data to the cloud is a good place to do it. Multiple cloud locations. So simple things like Google Drive, Dropbox, Box.com. That's good ways to do it. iCloud. Have multiple locations though, right? Don't just use your Google Drive because I can compromise your Google and then I can own your stuff. So have another location where you regularly back up the information so you can always grab it from someplace. Don't use the same passwords for everything, right? And with that, use strong passwords. On your laptops, use what's called full disk encryption. So things like BitLocker on Windows or also on your Mac devices, you can enable full disk encryption. Just Google search how to do that. That way, if I steal your laptop out of your car, I can't actually access the data on it. Use a credit card when you're doing purchasing online, not a debit card, mostly because it's easier to get your money back a lot faster. Don't think that the police or law enforcement are ever going to get your money back. It's very rare that they do. And don't think that criminals are ever going to be prosecuted. It's extremely rare that they ever are actually prosecuted, simply because most of them live outside the US, right? So they're in jurisdictions where they don't care that their people are committing crimes against people here in the US. Put a camera cover over your laptop, pretty simple. You can just put a piece of tape or something over that, or they sell them on Amazon for cheap. Be mindful of what you're posting on social media, right? So don't post that you're going out of town on vacation. Wait till you get back to talk about you're going out of town, right? Don't post your kids' names if you can avoid it. At least don't post their last names. Tell your children to be safer. Teach them how to be safer on social media. Tell them that no girl or guy is going to reach out to them and be like, oh, show me your junk, right? Take a video and then I'll show you mine. No, that's a scam going around Instagram right now by criminal elements. They're trying to extort your children for money. Don't do that stuff. So just educate people in your life around these types of things. Be mindful of what you're posting on social media. Anything you post out there can be weaponized against you, everything, including your favorite dog, right? Your favorite color. I can use that information, collect it, and then a year from now, use that against you. So just every time you go post something online, especially around your business, it could be weaponized against you. Just keep that in mind. Log out of your social media account. So if I log into my laptop and I log into my phone, if I'm not going to use my laptop, go into like your Facebook or something and log out of your device. That way I can't take over that session at some point. When you're going to use Wi-Fi, make sure it's actually legitimate, right? So like Xfinity is a good example. If it's the Xfinity app, it's going to be encrypted. So you'll see a little lock, right? If it's not, if it's someone else trying to impersonate that, it's usually unencrypted. So you won't see a lock. So that's a good, easy way to validate that it's actually the Wi-Fi you want to connect to. When you look at phishing emails, who actually sent the email? Hover your mouse over top of the email address, especially like in Google Mail, and see who it actually came from. Now, you can spoof that as well. So that's not 100%. You can also look at the original email, but that's a good, quick way to see, did it really come from this person or did it not? The biggest thing you could do with security and staying safer online is take a step back, right? Take a pause. No matter what you're doing, is take a pause and say, wait a minute, let me think on this, right? And then take action. When you're using ATMs, a lot of the older ATMs, you can just put a card skimmer over top of them where you insert your card. So if you're using an older ATM, if it looks older, just give it a quick jiggle before you stick your card in there. If it's a card skimmer, usually it'll pull off or it'll be loose. If it's actually the ATM, it's usually on there pretty firm, right? Same with the keypad when you're typing in your PIN. If it seems loose or maybe out of place a little bit, that's usually a good indicator that somebody's put a keypad over top of that to capture your PIN information. So don't use that ATM no matter how desperate you are. And then deleting accounts. If you decide I'm not going to use Twitter anymore, delete the account. Don't just leave it there. Same with Facebook or whatever. If you decide you don't want to use that social media account, just delete it, right? Delete it. Get rid of it. Make sure that nobody can take your information. So we've had a great presentation. We'll open it up for Q&A now. If there's any questions at all, just post them in the chat. But if you need more help, you can just reach out to me. You can find me at knltech.com or just email me, ken@knltech.com. That URL at the bottom there, cyberlife.tv, that's for the TV show. So if you want to get notified when my cybersecurity TV show is actually launching, you can visit that URL. There's a little button you can click to sign up. Just give your email address. I'm not going to spam you or anything like that. I don't sell your information. I'm a cyber guy, right? I don't sell all that stuff. I'm very mindful of privacy. But you can go there to get notified. You can also, if you sign up for the email list, you will get some behind the scenes access. So I'll be sending out probably this week some photos and at some point probably a video sort of sneak peek of the show. So you get first dibs on that. I will not be sharing that stuff on social media. So that's a good way for you to get that. So if there's any questions at all, like I said, post them in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing real quick here. And if there's any questions at all, feel free to share them and we'll get those addressed. If not, it's definitely been a blast doing this presentation with everybody.
Thank you so much, Ken. I see there is one question, and that is from Lady Hale, and she wants to know, how do I get my nonprofit website certified?
I'm not sure what you mean by certified on that, but if you're just looking for a security certificate, then usually your domain host will offer that. I think GoDaddy is like $20 or $50 or something like that. If you're looking at ADA certification, then you'll want to touch base with an attorney usually to get certified. I'm not sure 100% on exactly what you mean, so just feel free to post in the comments directly, and I'll try to answer that in the comments after the event here. But it really depends on what certification you're talking about.
Okay, and I'm checking for some more questions here. What is the first thing we should do if we are hacked?
So first thing you should do is determine what is hacked, right? So is it just your email address? Is it your Facebook account? Is it, it really depends on what's been hacked. The other thing you should do is, depending on what is hacked, so let's say it's your website through GoDaddy. they have a team that you can just reach out to and say, hey, I can't get into my stuff. It looks like somebody hacked it. And then they can go in and change your password for you. And you just have to verify like it's actually you, right? And then you can do that. If it's your Facebook account, you can usually reach out to Facebook, say I've been hacked. That'll allow you to verify yourself, and then you can change your password and stuff. If you've actually suffered a data breach where your data's been stolen, and that's where you probably want to involve a security team, right, or a security company to talk to see, do you need an actual forensic investigation, or is it something a little more simple, right? So you should reach out to professionals. There might also be instances where you need to reach out to law enforcement, keeping in mind that law enforcement should be not necessarily a last resort, but there shouldn't be your first step, right? Because there's an investigative process. They, depending on the amount or financial impact, they may not be able to do anything, right? So keep that in mind, that they're not always the first step, but they should be a step usually in the process at some point.
Awesome. I'm still scrolling through the comments. A lot of people, you shared a lot of information that we did not know. And I know I didn't know a lot either. And I'm almost scared. But I like what you talked about.
Yeah.
And I really like
we don't want to scare anyone too much, but just want to be mindful.
Right. You know, it's close to Halloween, so yeah. So, but I like how you broke down that hackers can look like anybody, because you're so correct that the media, TV has this, certain profile of how hackers look, and we don't realize it. And just in general, as people, sometimes we become so trusting, and people say nice things to us, and like you said, they walk off and leave their laptop, or they share information or share their devices, and we're not really vetting those people, as you say, to see who they are. And I like the gem that you dropped, that your website, people, if you don't have that security certificate, people are not even going to do business with you, because you're not taking the precautions to secure your information. So how can they trust, or especially if you're buying something, you sell something, if you don't have the proper security on your website, who wants to buy? They don't feel safe with buying your products from your website. So that was definitely a gem, and about making sure that your software is outdated. I know sometimes we see it on our phones and we push it off for the updates, and that's one of the major ways of how we get taken advantage of that way. And to never click on the links in text messages. I do that all the time. So
so do most people, right? Most people don't even give it a second thought until you're made aware of, honestly, how easy it is. If I was attacking someone, if I was a bad person, that's probably the number one way I'm going to do it, because it's so easy, especially if you get a text at 3 a.m. If you don't build the habit of not clicking links, you might just click a link and it's a malicious one. And then you don't realize it. You say, well, nothing happened. You go back to sleep. You wake up and you go about your day. But meanwhile, somebody in Russia or someplace, right, or just down the street, is looking at everything you're doing that day, right? So you have to build these things as habits, right? These have to be habits, not just a one-time thought.
Yes, and there was just so much more information. You said vet the people you do business with. Make sure you have that security certificate. And thanks for sharing the virustotal.com. I think that website is probably going to get blown up now that you shared that.
Yeah, and what I'll do for everyone, I have another call I have to jump on after this, but I will share in the comment area of on the Houston OBO page for this session. I will share a lot of different links for free resources. So anything I share is a non-malicious link. I've vetted them all, so these will be free resources. In fact, I'll probably just throw them in a document and just share a Google Doc that everybody can access, and just find the links there. You can copy them and have them there for you. So I'll share a lot of stuff for everybody, free resources, etc.
Awesome. I don't see any additional questions. I'm sorry, there is one. Any recommendations on protecting ourselves through identity secure services in case we are hacked personally?
Yeah, so I'll touch on two things. Number one, you should have credit monitoring. That's default across the board. You should definitely have that. However, the identity theft protection, research them. Don't believe that what they say. There's a lot of it's marketing messages. But if you feel that there's some value there and it's low cost enough, then by all means, feel free to do it. I mean, I do have identity theft stuff, but I don't pay a lot for it. I don't pay for some premium plan. Scanning the scans of the dark web, the dark web, you have to go through a special browser that's encrypted, and these very malicious sites are encrypted. Scanning the dark web means nothing. It's just not real, right? It's not real. So don't pay extra to get a dark web scanning. That's just a marketing ploy for you, right? There's no such thing. What there is, though, is that they do have research teams that will scan and look at the most common marketplaces and see if your data is out there. But again, if it's going to cost you an arm and a leg to get that service, it's not worth it.
Excellent. And the last question is, how secure is PayPal and MS on OneDrive, Microsoft OneDrive?
Well, I mean, PayPal itself uses very strong encryption, but you need to understand that it's the fundamentals, right? Have a strong password, enable the two-factor authentication. And I typically, for sensitive stuff I'm doing, I typically have a specific machine I do it on. And I really do what's called hardening that machine, right? So make sure that just about every possible avenue into that machine, it's not happening, right? I don't do social media on there. I don't do anything. So if you can't do that, if that's not practical for you, then just do the fundamentals of making sure you have the two-factor authentication, change your password, change it 60 to 90 days. Usually 90 days is good enough, but make sure it's strong, right? Use a password manager like a LastPass so you can generate random passwords. So you just have to remember one password to get into your LastPass. And then you've got all your accounts in there with random passwords, and you can generate new ones every so often.
Awesome.
The thing about security real quick is you have to make it a habit, right? So if you realistically can't think of a new password every 90 days, use a password manager and make your life easier, and have a specific day of the week that's your security day, and you check everything, you do everything, you change your passwords, all that stuff on one day of the week, so you know that you're not missing anything.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing a plethora of information and this was the perfect timing in doing this for National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We are definitely aware, almost too aware. And just so, again, Ken, thank you, the Ken Underhill, for sharing all the information. He's also going to post some information in the chat, in the comment section. So make sure you tune back in to check that information, as well as this was recorded. And so we'll also have it on our YouTube page. And of course, it will stay on our timeline here on Facebook. So Ken, do you have any last words before we close out?
Final words are just, it's the fundamentals, right? We focus so much on technology all the time, but really, if we do some fundamental things, we can really, for the most part, as small business owners, prevent probably around 80–85% of breaches just by making sure we do the fundamentals. So again, just focus on baking that into your life, making it a habit, and for the most part, you should be pretty fine out there.
Awesome. Thank you again. And thank you everyone for tuning in. And you have Ken's information, reach out to him. If you have questions, I know I definitely will. So again, thank you all. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of October now that we've gotten scared.
Absolutely. And for anyone wondering, I'm going as a hacker this year for Halloween. So.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks.